change doesn't take a long time. When your heart gets ignited so much, it's a knowing. It's not from here, it's from here. But for the first time in my life, I stood up to him right in his face and I said, shoot, I am not scared of you anymore. And today, Mom, you're gonna make a decision. I leave or he leaves. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice.
Welcome to another episode of Liberating Humanity. I'm extremely excited about our guest today. Dr. Hoa has been a friend of me and Vanessa for a long time. Her and her husband Jaime heard me speak about child rescue missions way before the movie came out, before I was able to be public, and she has been instrumental. In fact, both of them have been incredibly instrumental in helping us take that message to thousands and thousands of people. In fact, when I decided to go public, it was her connections, her and Jaime's connections, that opened up the door to some large conferences so that thousands of people could be inspired by our message of healing and hope. The reason I'm bringing Dr. Hoa on today on the Liberating Humanity podcast is that this podcast is all about personal transformation, not rags to riches, but more hurt to healing in a very powerful way. And we talk a lot about how hurt people hurt other people. But the ones that I respect the most are the ones who have been through a lot of crap, but have used that to not justify a life of hurting others, to not justify a life of making excuses, but instead to focus on what they can give to the world in the positive way that they can show up in their family, in creating value for you and I. So incredibly excited today to share with you my dear friend, Dr. Hoa.
Thank you so much for having me on, Paul. Meeting you and Vanessa has been a big pivotal transformation in my journey. So I'm blessed and honored to be here today with you.
Well, I'm excited. we just finished a transformational retreat in which you brought a handful of people who really needed that help with their broken hearts and some of the challenges, and you helped to hold space for them in such a beautiful way on their way through that transformation. So the last 4 days, I, especially in having you share with the group and hearing in detail some of the parts of your story that I didn't even know before, I thought this story needs to be heard by our audience because it is so inspiring. So let's start with where you were born and kind of the history of your family and some of the challenges that they went through and how you ended up being a doctor and literally just helping people in so many ways everywhere around the world, and now being even a public speaker. So let's start in the beginning. Where
it's been a rather long journey, but my father was actually fighting in the Vietnam War, and he was imprisoned. And when he came out, and after the war ended, he was actually the one who had a family boat, and he fled the country with 45 people. And at the time, I was the youngest, but I wasn't born yet, actually. I am the youngest. But at the time, my mom had 2 of my older brothers on the boat with 45 people. And then we went to the Philippines. So they were at sea for 7 days. And I was born in the refugee camps in Manila in the Philippines. And so we stayed there for a year. And when someone leaves a country and they flee, they leave everything behind, right? And so you're going empty-handed, just in hopes for finding freedom and an opportunity for the kids. And so my dad, Germany being one of the first countries to open borders for the refugees, we wound up going to Germany for almost 8 years. And where my dad really wanted to come was America. America was really the goal to, live the American dream, come for the opportunity, for the land of opportunity. You hear that all the time. And so, my parents such humble beginnings, and it was a struggle for them. And when we came to the U.S., I was almost close to 9 years old, and we moved from the north. You know, we were in Pennsylvania and Virginia, and we moved to so many different states. And I was in 18 different schools, so you learn to adapt, and English being my third language. We settled in New Orleans in a $3,000 trailer in the projects of New Orleans, right? And so the immigrant story is not new, right? But what I realized through my own journey, it wasn't just poverty, right? It was when we were growing up, I came in a household where our culture, we don't hug. My mom and dad never hugged me. We never kissed. They never said, I'm proud of you, I love you, or any of that. And so as a child growing up, like I just wanted affection, right? And what I witnessed growing up was drugs, crime. I had a gun to my head twice at a young age. Like that was not the life my dad sacrificed leaving the country to build. He goes, this is not the American dream. My dad became very depressed, became very heavy alcoholic, became very abusive. And so witnessing that, I was very heartbreaking because I love my dad very much. And I know like how much a giver he is. I witnessed my mom and dad, even though we didn't have anything, like we were so poor ourselves, but we were constantly bringing home homeless people to our trailer, which was tiny, but we were always feeding and clothing others because that's something that they're just givers, right? So even in the midst of all this abuse, I knew that my dad had his own inner demons, right, that he was dealing with. And so by the age of, I had just turned 13, and my dad was like lying on the sofa, and he passed away in his sleep, right? And so he was still in sleeping position. I sat next to him and went to school and realized like he had already passed in his sleep because he had liver cirrhosis. He drank too much. He was just, not in a good space. And with my mom, she was oldest of seven. In Vietnam, she wasn't allowed to go to school. She never, received love, and she was always, abused as a child herself. And so she doesn't know what love looks like. She didn't have that level of affection. But I didn't know that. I mean, I'm young, right? I didn't have that perspective growing up just yet. I just was craving love, and I couldn't receive that.
What do you think the difference is between all of the people who have had guns pointed at their heads as kids, their dad died at a young age, their parents were alcoholics, and all of these things, who chose a life of crime, who chose at that age, put yourself now in this teenage self, right? You're 13, your dad just died of liver failure because of over drinking, and you're living in the projects, and you've been craving love. You made a choice to go down a road of eventually becoming a doctor and being a well-known public speaker and all of these beautiful things that you've done in your life that is very different from those who use a gun to your head and your dad dying and abuse in the home as an excuse of why they start going down this road of crime and hurting other people.
Right. At a young age, I was in the fifth grade, and I remember reading a book by Viktor Frankl called A Man's Search for Meaning. And I would journal a lot. I would read Siddhartha, and I would read different books that gave me perspective. Like, even in the worst of times, that you can use that pain and change and create a life that's a different path. Now, I had two other older brothers. One of my brothers is also a doctor. My other brother, during that teenage years, decided to use and go a different path. We all had the same upbringing, right? But he chose the life of crime and life of drugs and gangs, and he was in and out of jail constantly. because he had a very different perspective of life. He just thought life's not fair. And I said, look, wait a minute. In my mind, school was my saving grace. My mom didn't get a chance to go to school. And here I am in America. I was allowed to go to school. And so I picked that vertical to decide I am going to do the best that I can with the resources, the limited resources we have, that would be an out for me. I learned how to work at a very young age. I started working in the family business by age 10. And so I knew work ethic, and I learned a lot of different skill sets in the kitchen. I learned how to do nails. I learned a lot of different things that I could do to create money, per se. But I said, even though I didn't see it as like, well, it's not fair, I just wanted an out for myself. And I wanted to live that American dream. I wanted to be able to show a different pathway and break that chain. I just didn't want to continue having to pass down from generation to generation to generation. And I wanted to be the person to break that link.
Break that chain. Who gave you the book by Viktor Frankl?
I
You
went
just
and
found it
got it.
yourself.
I went and found it. Back then I didn't have a phone. There was no internet. I didn't own a laptop or anything like that. And I just was one of those, and I just went to go look for those type of things and read about, just different teachings to give me some grip of a reason to want to have more of a positive mindset. And I was hyper focused, and I was really like, okay, school is going to be my vertical. And, I was a young entrepreneur. I knew how to buy and sell at a very young age. And because my mom, and I think, we talk about pivotal moments of what really drives you. When my dad passed, my mom started getting into, she had a boyfriend who was also very extremely abusive, who again also every time he got angry would take a gun and threaten to kill us. And I remember leaving the house and sleeping in the bushes one night with my mom, just hiding from him. And I'm just thinking, we cannot possibly continue living like this. And I'm thinking, why would my mom stay with someone like this? And I see so many women that go through domestic abuse where they just don't feel like they have an out. And I remember very vividly coming home from school one day, and I see glass and everything shattered in my house, and I hear my mom screaming in the bedroom. And I knew she was abused, but I've never firsthand witnessed it. But that day when I came home and I opened up the bedroom door, I ran in after I heard her screaming, and I see him grabbing my mom's hair and just beating her. You talk about pain and pivotal moment. That moment lives in my heart forever, but I remember that very vivid moment where I'm super shy. I've always been super introverted. I've never voiced anything. But for the first time in my life, I stood up to him right in his face and I said, shoot me. I am not scared of you anymore. And today, Mom, you're going to make a decision. I leave or he leaves.
How old were you?
I was 15 at this time.
Wow.
And I remember it was the first time that I actually took a stance, that I no longer lived in fear. And he never saw that side of me. My mom had never seen the side of me. And it's like almost like like in an instant, I changed, right? And I remember very vividly in that moment, he left. And he left, right? And it was just, I was so done with like suppressing a lot of the abuse, suppressing a lot of the things that I had gone through. I didn't have a voice. But at that moment, just physically witnessing that, and it's been a long healing journey for me. It's been a long healing journey for my mom.
Well, and you've been an advocate and right in the front lines in helping women see the strength within themselves. I saw it this last 4 days in you just turning these women into these beautiful goddesses that loved themselves and believed in themselves. And we've seen that over and over again. It's really self-love that a lot of people are missing. And you hit on it yourself. A lot of cultures don't have that. I mean, I grew up in the U.S. and it wasn't even a cultural thing. My father never got hugged and never heard "I love you" from his mother or his father, and so I never received it from him. I not once. However, I I I don't sit around and think, oh, my dad wasn't emotionally available. No, I understand that hurt people act that way, and I understood knowing his mother kind of where things came from, and that's okay. That's okay. What every time that I point a finger at somebody else in blame, I've got three fingers pointing back at me, right? And so I have to take responsibility, blame for where I am, for what I'm doing in my life. That is the most disempowering emotion I can have. The most empowering one is taking responsibility for what is mine and learning to love myself regardless of how I grew up or anything else. And so you I have seen lives completely transform because you came into their life just like you did your mother. At 15 years old, you stood up to what was the worst part of your family at that time and said, "Listen, it's either me or him, he's gone." And you helped your mother see how you don't have to put up with that. You don't have to live a life of quiet desperation. You can learn to stand up for yourself. You can learn to love yourself. And so talk a little bit about what you learned in that moment at 15 and how you helped your mom step away from that and how you've lived a life of helping so many other people do the same and see the best part in themselves
Yeah,
as well.
15 was a pivotal year for both my mom and I, and especially after having at least that component of fear, Living in fear is horrible. When the pain, when you live in constant pain and fear like that, and my mom in her own healing journey. And it was hard because at the time, my mom, I mean, she's my rock and my foundation. But it was hard for us to openly communicate because of just her upbringing. And she was extremely hard on me. But I thank her because of that. I was very disciplined and focused in my academia and things of that nature. But my mom, she confessed to me afterwards that she was ready to take her life. She was already um, in the process and of committing suicide.
Wow, wouldn't that have been a travesty for your family with your father
Hmm.
dying and then 2 years later your mom is ready to
And
end it herself?
but it was divine timing that a family friend came at the right time to save her because at that moment she was about to take her life. And I never shared that with anyone, but it's something that she finally told me after. And so she had to do a lot of her own inner healing, and it wasn't her time. And her friend really talked her out of it. And she says, "I'm going to live for my children." And so I'm grateful. I'm grateful that she decided that she wanted to live for us. And if it wasn't for my parents, I wouldn't be here. And she never knew how I did in school. I helped her in the family business. And for a woman who doesn't know how to speak English, drive, or ever go to formal school, for her to even have a small convenience store. And eventually, I helped my mom upgrade to different businesses and, together. But it was healing because even though we didn't have that public affection or kind of like that, it was almost like we were business partners, because I was the one 7 days a week with her. And so spending a lot of that time together and working all the time together in these businesses really did create some closeness and bond.
So why do you think, you're so confident, even though you likely went through more hardship in your childhood than even your stepdad, who was, or not stepdad, the boyfriend that was coming in and beating her, even her and others who kind of allow life to beat them down, but you've said, no, I'm going to live in love, I'm going to live in light, I'm going to work through my stuff. So if you can think back, in your amazing journey, because we're going to get into what you've created in this world, but I think the audience needs to understand, they don't need to understand the details of what you went through, but to understand that indeed your childhood was rough. It was really rough. You went through a lot of pain, yet you were able to be the person who stood up and said, "No, we're not going to allow this in our house anymore," and we're not going to. And you helped your mother get out of that, and others get to the point where they can live in love and light and truth and
Right.
healing.
At a very young age, I wouldn't say I was always very spiritual. And I think that was my saving grace. I prayed a lot, and I knew I was never alone. And I wanted to be the change. I didn't want to see people suffering. I knew at a very young age, like, I wasn't in the social circles. I was not the one going out to the parties and friends. And like, I was very focused, but I also knew in my heart at a young age, in my own spiritual path, that I'm here to make a difference and that I'm not alone. Sexual abuse, physical trauma, poverty, verbal abuse, not having self-love, all of those things, they're common themes. Not having self-confidence, but then building that through my journey. Because I went through and lived that pain and have experienced it firsthand, I know I can help the next person because I don't just read about it in concept or in theory, I lived it. But because at a very young age, I had a good perspective of the world. And when you move to different countries and you have a different lens in the view of the world, that was my saving grace. I prayed a lot. I journaled at a very young age. I was a very mature young child. And I think I was forced to be a very mature young child because I went through all of that. And maybe it was God's way of having me go through that so that I can now have the courage and the heart to want to help other people. And that is my life mission. And I know that. I knew that at a very young age. And all of these, becoming a doctor, I became a doctor because I wanted to help people. And those are all verticals, right? And I met Jaime, the most beautiful soul, in optometry school, you know? And I know energy. I've always been very intuitive at a very young age with people and energy. And my circle of friends and circle of people have always been very small, right? But that has allowed me to really, and now it's expanded to massive circles. But at the beginning of my journey, I kept it very small because trust was a factor. And I've learned as I started healing, then I opened up and removed a lot of those walls. We all protect for our own survival and protection. We build these walls around our hearts. And as we, heal and keep healing and growing, those walls come down and we allow people into our inner circle and that trust builds. But that's always been my mission to utilize my own story, to utilize my own experience. And I know firsthand how painful that is. And I didn't want to be the one to pass that down to my daughter or if my future children or to future generations. That trauma has to stop. And I knew I was going to be the one to stop that.
That's what I love about
Yeah.
your story, and that's really where this whole theme of liberating humanity came from, is realizing after years of undercover that just rescuing the kids was never going to fix it. I've got to figure out how to take away the demand, how to fix the traffickers before they decide to traffic kids, and then realizing the problem was even bigger, where it wasn't just the trafficked children. There was 1 out of every 4 women that we know were abused in their own homes as children, and half of all women that we know at some time in their life sexually abused. And so there's this huge number, a huge problem in it, and that's what's wrong with our world, is the fact that we've got generational trauma with all of us in some way. And so the purpose of this is to dig down and say, okay, what makes the difference? What makes the difference between somebody who says, okay, I was sexually abused as a child, I was physically abused as a child, I was verbally abused as a child, and my dad died, and all these things happened, and that's my excuse for going to Colombia and raping a child. Well, no, there's no excuse for it, right? There's no excuse. So the question is, what is the defining difference? And you start talking about pivotal moments, and for some of us, those pivotal moments are super dark things that you were standing at a crossroad, right? You're like, okay, I'm in this crossroad. This is hell in my house. This man has literally got my mom by the hair and he's beating her and glass is breaking. I'm only 15 years old. I'm going to either take myself out with my mom or go start drinking with my friends or doing all of this road that leads to destruction, or I'm going to stand up. I'm going to release my fear. I'm going to stand up for what's right, and I'm going to protect our family the best I know how, and I'm going to use this motivation to work hard in school, to create value for the world, to help other women live in their place of peace and love for themselves, etc. This was a direction you chose. Now, fortunately, most women who have gone through abuse as children end up being protectors. Now, a lot of them, though, have really low self-esteem or anxiety or depression or challenges like that. The men, unfortunately, they not only have low self-esteem, they got anger issues and addictions, and many times they'll pass that trauma on, etc. And so the real question is, how can humanity, because all of us have dealt with some kind of trauma, and I brought you on because you've done so much with your life and you went through hell like very few people that I know, and so if we can help our audience see how they can take those pivotal moments in their life and choose this path rather than this path, then in literally one generation, we can end child abuse, we can end domestic violence, we can end child trafficking, all of these things we can resolve if we can help people heal before they ever pass that trauma on.
One of the things that I would say is, when you talk about gratitude, with everything that happens, your blessings will always outweigh your challenges. Always. Regardless of if you think this could be the worst thing ever that's happening at the moment, learning how to put my feelings and thoughts onto paper and through prayer and really understanding and realizing the blessings was really the key thing that gave me perspective that my past does not define my future. And I knew at every moment that whatever happens, whatever in the moment I am, I still have 2 hands. My mind's still functioning. I still have my eyes to see. My lungs and my heart and everything, I'm breathing. I'm getting up today. I'm still alive. I still have a mom. I'm living in America with electricity. I mean, there's so many things
I love
that we
that.
take for granted, the simplicity of just being alive. Do you know how many people do not have all the body parts or can't see, or they're an orphan, or they're living with no clean water and no electricity? I mean, if you view it through that lens and that perspective, I'm freaking blessed.
Beautiful.
Right?
I mean, you're living in a $3,000 trailer with
I have a roof over my head.
Exactly. That's a beautiful way of seeing it. And I think that the most powerful thing that you touched on multiple times now was prayer and understanding that whatever is happening right now is temporary. That you've got a connection with your creator, that the universe and the big picture is so much more than what we're focusing on in our finite world. And that different perspective that you had, and you talked a few times about journaling as well, and in your journaling expressing that gratitude. I think that's really the key that I'm seeing that makes you different than the other 13-year-old who lost his dad, who was abused as a child, whose mom was getting ready to commit. So whatever it was that was living in a $3,000 trailer, everybody can use this excuse and then allow that darkness to overcome them. Or you can say, you know what? I've got amazing blessings. I actually love my dad, even though he had, some alcohol things, and I can build a healthy relationship with my mom, and I can cut off the negative ones that she has, and I'm powerful, even though I'm only 15 years old, to be able to make a difference. I believe that came from your relationship with God and the fact that you were journaling gratitude for what was good in your life. There's there's the there's the answer to that riddle, that what I'm seeing in your life as to what helped you navigate down this road rather than the one that could lead to sadness and destruction.
It is. And it's a constant process, because as our journeys evolve, you know, if you're consistent though, and that was what I was always consistent with, is prayer and gratitude and journaling, because it's never linear. We all go through our peaks and valleys and we have weak moments, but when we remind ourselves, and I go back and I read my journals, and those life journals, ever since I was young and now I still journal till this day, because it really allows us, wow, to self-reflect. I'm like, I've grown so much, through that journey. And it is true. It doesn't matter. Everything, like you said, it's temporary. And I've heard one of the sayings is like, what did they say? Pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. We all go through pain, but how we create a story around that and what you do with it. Because of my upbringing, I chose not to drink. Because of my upbringing, I chose not to ever experience with drugs. Because of my upbringing, I did not allow my standard for abuse in any form, emotional, physical, mental, whatever form. I wanted a relationship that's built with true love. And so my standards, I was like, absolutely not. I would never get into a relationship to mirror what I grew up with, right? And so I see it as a blessing because I went through that. I didn't want to have that type of life, you know? And so I created a higher standard for the life that I wanted to create and that I am creating and what I was going to attract. But I knew that the best way to do that is to work on me. And so that's why my self-development journey and everything, I can't work with the outer world. I can't control anybody else. But I heck as well can control and work what I want on me and building the inner strength, the inner courage, the inner confidence, the knowledge, and everything so that I can attract what I want in my life.
Well, indeed you did. I mean,
Yeah.
Jaime is an amazing man.
He is a beautiful soul.
What I have so much respect for your husband, and you guys were meant for each other, and by you just going down that road of personal development, starting with reading Viktor Frankl when you were a little kid, and all all the way through this journey, you've literally been able to attract and create a life of beautiful abundance, not only for you, but for everyone that associates with you and your husband. Their life is better. You guys have created not only a very successful medical practice together, but a very successful real estate practice where it's benefiting so many tenants and so many people in that world as well. Now, 20 years ago, you went through a very difficult time and a very beautiful time all at the same, and when I hear you tell this story, it's all based on gratitude, but almost a wake up moment. But that was the same year that you met your sweetheart as well.
So 2005, 20-year anniversary now, right? Was another pivotal moment in my life, because I was very hard on myself. I studied very hard. I became valedictorian. I was one of those who was working 3 jobs while I was double majored. And so that was me, right? I wanted to create this beautiful life. But what happens when you go on that high speed and always, always striving to be excellent in perfection is you eventually burn out. And 2005 was a hard year. It was my worst year and my best year, in the sense that I've always had a positive mindset. I've always been a go-getter and creating everything and giving back. Like I was living that, but I got to a point where I was so burnt out. And I was in optometry school, and here everyone is now like, oh, she does so well in school. She's got it all together. She's the change of our family, and everybody really looked up to me. And that year was a dark year. It was the first year that I failed in optometry school. And it was the first time that I didn't have a good, I broke up during a relationship. And because of, I didn't know how to cope with failing. It was my first time failing, and I didn't know how to tell my family I failed optometry school. I felt some shame. I felt guilt. And it was the first time I ever experienced depression. And it was a dark chapter. And you read about depression, you read about anxiety, but it's just getting out of bed is a challenge, much less take a shower, much less get up to face the world. And here I am, even with my prayers and even through my gratitude practice, that year was tough for me. But the saving grace again was prayer and gratitude, right? But it was hard. I admit that year was hard because I was spiraled. And when you start getting into a dark space in your mind with depression, sometimes it's hard to climb out. It's just negative thoughts stack and stack and stack. And what I learned, in addition to gratitude, in addition to journey, if you're ever going through a dark time, is change your environment. And so if you physically change your environment, getting out of whatever house, whatever area, the people you normally are around, if you physically get yourself out and be in a different area around different people, that environmental change alone makes a big shift. And so that really helped me. But that was the year that I also had a really bad car accident. Jaime and I, he came into my life and we were dating. And it was the year that I was driving from Dallas to Austin, and it was nighttime. And I was driving on the fast lane, and there's this big tire, this 18-wheel tire that came off. They had a bunch of them, and one of them came straight down. And I prayed to God. I was like, I prayed to God to help me. And my seatbelt buckled back. My car flipped at least 4 or 5 times, upside down in a ditch. And I could hear so many people coming and running. They had to pull me out of the window, right? And I should have died 20 years ago. But at that moment, knowing that I survived that, and by saving grace of God, that I kissed that ground and I was given a second chance of life, that snapped me out of that mental state. Like when you talk about pivotal moments, like I was no longer in any dark. Like I was so grateful to be touching the ground and having a second chance of life again. And it was also the time that I met Jaime, and he's just this beautiful soul of light. And everything, like he was kind and gentle and like loving. It was the first time in my life that I experienced love. I don't even know what love felt like, and I was like, God must have sent an angel to save me because he's so beautiful. And I was like, this is what love feels like. And he would just, his embrace, I just always felt safe in his embrace. But I laughed to him because I was like, I manifested you. I hope you know. I wrote everything I wanted in a man, like you did for
Just
Vanessa.
like I did for Vanessa. I said, I created you.
I
Right here.
created
Here's
you.
my list.
And I said, I joke about it now, but I was like, I really created Jaime, and he's such a beautiful soul. And we make 20 years this year. It's my
Happy anniversary.
and it's my 20 year of life, and I'm so blessed. But when you think of moments of darkness, like being in that depressive state, but it was also the most beautiful. That car accident truly, truly gave me so much perspective. If I get to live life again, I have nothing to be depressed or like none of that. That snapped me out like quick. I'm
Well,
like,
and what's beautiful is it takes you right back to what pulled you through
yeah,
all of the crap in your high school
right,
years and your younger years. It's that gratitude.
right.
I think that so many times, depression is it comes a lot of times from a lack of gratitude. What are you depressed about? Well, this happened and that happened. I'm
Right.
this. Well, if you just focus on being grateful for all that is. In fact, we did our meditation the last couple yesterday. We helped people learn how to manifest the life of their dreams through gratitude. I really believe that gratitude for things that you're creating in the future is the purest form of faith. If you can feel gratitude even before they come, but it has to start with us feeling grateful for all of the good things in our life that we have right now, and then mirroring that gratitude for all the things in our life that brought us to here, even the crappy things, right? And you look back and you're even now expressing gratitude for that guy that was going into your mom. Why? Because that was a pivotal moment for you, right? And for the fact that you lived in a $3,000 trailer because of the fact that that motivated you like it did. And so many times we can either look at the things in our life with being upset about this and depressed about this, or we can say, no, I'm alive. I've got my two hands. I got my feet. The breath in my lungs is something I can be grateful for all by itself. And that one thing has brought you to this amazing place where now you can focus on helping others. So now you talked a little bit about personal development, and I would love to share with the audience your journey of personal development. I tell people that the most valuable piece of real estate you could ever own is the 6 inches between your ears. But I believe that the more valuable piece of real estate you could own is this little part right here.
Right here is the most
Exactly.
valuable.
It is. And creating a super freeway between this one and this one,
That's the magic.
that's the magic. That's the longest journey for most people, is that
Right.
journey between your head and your heart. But that that is the most valuable piece, and if you can heal that, develop that piece of real estate, that's incredibly valuable for everything you're doing in your life. So talk about your personal development here and your personal development here.
And that's a big part, because I started personal development at a very young age, which has helped me a lot. So I've always been in that space, and I started listening to a lot of different. I read books about personal development. I read and listen to a lot of motivation and personal development. So I've always been good about doing that and programming that into my subconscious. And I started doing a lot of retreats about 10 years ago around the world, and retreats that are meditative and just in nature, and, utilizing yoga and those type. And even and I found that that was helpful. But I will tell you, in my, I don't know, I don't want to I mean, since the 5th grade to now, that's a long time being in the self-development space. But I have never experienced anything like last year coming to this retreat here in Colombia. And when I heard about psilocybin, and I read a lot about it and, talked to people who experienced it, I admit I had fear at the beginning because I had never taken anything, remember? No, I haven't even smoked a cigarette. I don't even want to take any Advil, right? But it's a calling, because I've always been intuitive, and I knew, I had already dreamed about coming here. And I already knew that that was going to be the next level of transformation for me. And I had experienced it, envisioned it already. So May of last year, coming here for my first journey experience, and especially coming with a group of my own community that I trusted, and knowing you and Vanessa, when I first heard you speak, there are no coincidences, Paul. I knew from my heart, and I always tell people, change doesn't take a long time. When your heart gets ignited so much, it's a knowing. It's not from here, it's from here.
From your heart, yeah.
And that, like, the more that I learned about child trafficking, the more that I learned about, I just wanted to make even a bigger difference. And I felt like with all of my blessings and all of the ecosystems that I knew I could create a bigger impact. But in order to do that from an authentic space, I wanted to be the best and highest version of me first. And so it's great to have all the other things on reading and different type of retreats, but what the plant medicine did for me was it really, we all talk about, oh, I'm healed, because I remember telling you, I'm already good, Paul. I'm healed. Like, I'm good. I just want to be the next best version of me.
I remember telling you, I'm like,
I'm
I
good.
know you're already good. Let's take you from your 3.0 version to a 4.0 version.
And so I was like, okay, well, we'll see what else comes up, right? But the thing was, I came into the space with an absolute open heart and open mind to see what the next best version of me would truly look like. And I think that's important. And because I completely trusted you and Vanessa and Kira, and this space you have here is, oh my God, it's absolutely stunning to be in nature. And I had already been coming to Colombia for 7 or 8 years. Absolutely love it here, right? But that experience for me took me to a whole nother level of healing. What I thought I had already healed, especially with all my childhood trauma, I laid for 6 to 7 hours. And all of this came up, that we build walls because we have to be strong. That inner child wasn't healed all the way. Was like, I just suppressed that inner child, because now this version of Hoa is leading and is doing just fine. That poor inner child wasn't voiced, didn't get heard, didn't truly get released and get the love that inner child needed. And so that plant medicine brought me to a space where I can feel so much more compassion and love for my mom. I had so much, like, I forgave my mom because she did the best she could for me, but she didn't protect me. And so I held a level of resentment in my heart. And I was like, I love my mom to death, but she would trigger me. Like, there was some emotion or hurt still left over that carried to my adulthood behaviors in relationships and things like that. And what I realized was, when I felt the pain and love that she had from her heart, oh my gosh, like, if I did nothing else but remend that relationship and true love with my mom, that was worth the whole experience for me. And I love my mom so much deeper to feel like she does genuinely love me. Absolutely. And I forgive her and I forgive myself because for the longest time, Paul, I didn't speak about that part of it. I would share bits and pieces of my story, but I couldn't talk about that part because I couldn't expose my mom because I love her so much.
And you've come to this, like I have. We all come to this realization that in using this guided meditation, facilitated plant medicine experience, it it opens up our hearts to connect with the important people in our life like we've never connected before. It's I talk about my first experience is going into this place of pure empathy where I could feel how every other person is feeling and how my words are affecting them and why they did the things they did to me, because I could feel their pain from where they came from before. And it's beautiful because I remember one of my undercover operators at the end of one of these experiences, and he had kind of cut away all of his heart, his feeling, because of his service in the military as being a special forces guy and seeing a lot of death and whatnot. He had told me before, I love my wife and my kids, but I don't feel anything. I don't. And I remember after that first experience, he said, Paul, I feel love for my kids like I never have. I feel love for my wife like I never have. I feel love for myself for the first time that I can remember. I can feel the love of God. And I think that's what a lot of it is that we live our lives up here in this rational stuff, but if we can move that down to our hearts, just like we talked about earlier, this is really the most valuable piece of real estate is your heart, not your head. And by expanding that, not just saying, okay, I'm going to develop, I'm going to expand my heart. I'm going to expand this real estate to the point where I'm connected deeply with all of those loved ones in my life. Right. Then I can understand them to a point where it's there's no blame left.
No more blame.
We release all that blame. We replace it with total empathy and love in a beautiful way, and that alone heals so many of our relationships, of our trauma. Even that love, that empathy for the younger version of ourselves, that needed that love at that time that wasn't getting it from other places. We in our adult self can help heal that child by giving that younger version of ourselves that love that he or she needs.
The other thing that I find really special about this space, especially in the retreat space here, with the plant medicine specifically, obviously that's the main component, is that heart component and the love. The other component I found that was really strong and helpful is just raising the level of mindfulness and awareness. That it's not just an experience while you're here. You carry that forward to your everyday life and integrate. And the simplicity of things, I remember going back, just, leaving the beautiful nature and going back to the city and getting back into our daily living. And I remember, just the simplicity of things, the beauty of the birds, the trees, the things that I've lived there God knows how long. And I was like, you just don't pay attention. And so when you slow down and that mindfulness, that level of appreciation and gratitude to a whole nother level, to the simple everyday living. And my perspective of life has even changed to a higher dimension now, where I'm not worried about the next big thing. We're so in this next big project, this next big thing, this next milestone, this next thing, right? And I've been able to truly have this level of true inner peace where I am in the flow state and I'm not worried about 10 million things. And even the things that I am, that we have businesses and things like that, it gives me so much more clarity and just calmness to come up with solutions, to pray and meditate for what the steps are, who are the people that can help, instead of this level of stress. And stress kills people. And that busy, going on autopilot and not being mindful and living the day to day, celebrating our wins and realizing we've come a long way. And that when you talk about self-love and truly understanding and living in the present moment and being with the people that matter the most, like live with no regrets, right? And that's been a big shift in like how Jaime and I live. You know, we thought we were doing a pretty darn good job already, right?
And you were.
And we were. But this just took it to a whole nother accelerated level.
Exactly.
You know, I said, oh gosh, had I experienced this 20 years ago, can you imagine the growth of that?
Yeah, I think back on my life, man. I I feel bad for my kids having to grow up with the old version of me, right? You're in this beautiful place where your daughter is 9 and she gets to see, all this beautiful growth from a heart space of both of her parents. And I loved how you touched on the being mindful and being in the present. That's one of the most beautiful things that I've received as well in this journey space, is the fact that I can I'm not living with all of the anxiety about what's to come. I'm not living within all of the depression of what was, right? I can live in the total present moment and appreciate all of it. The reality is everything resides right here. The future the only exists in my thoughts in the moment. The past only exists in my thoughts in the moment, right? This moment right here is everything, and we pass it by all the time. We literally are just walking here, and we're not taking in. It's funny. We've heard the saying forever: "Stop and smell the roses." Okay, yeah. I realized a few years ago, I never really did that. Like really did that. So I literally took a rose and just sat there for like half an hour. This guy's like, "What are you making out with this rose?" No, I'm taking some time to like take this in, because so much of our life is just spent out and just missing all of the beauty of the present moment of everything that we're creating. So, well, I am incredibly impressed with the life that you have created and what you have attracted into your life, what you have created in your life, that what you have liberated from your life, what you have said, you know what, that doesn't serve me anymore. That boyfriend of my mother at the time, he doesn't serve me anymore. He's done. You're right. These memories of my past, hey, I'm going to use them to serve me. I'm going to be grateful for what is. And I think that the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway from all of this was understanding how you were able to take the challenges of being an immigrant and the challenges of living in poverty and the challenges of different types of abuse that you witnessed, etc. And instead of defining yourself by any of those, you use them as motivations to live a life of abundance, a life of creating anything that you wanted, and most importantly, that you lived in a place of gratitude for the things for everything and what you learned from it, and you express that gratitude in your connection with your creator. That's I think the biggest takeaway that I got from understanding your story, because I was so I had known for a long time how incredibly successful of a life that you've created, but I didn't know until just this last year the heaviness that you went through to then get to here, and I'm just so impressed. So, if I know that you have a podcast as well, and you're speaking and whatnot. I'd love it if you told the audience how they could find you and how they can hear you speak, because your story, when you tell all the details of your story when you speak, is super exciting, and just tell the audience how to find you, social media, and what you're working on now, etc.
Right. And so, we do have a podcast that we started last year called The Live and Give Show. And we'll start up again this year, this season, probably next month. We're on YouTube. You can look up The Live and Give Show. I do have a website. It's called Be the One, number 23.com. And I say be the one is because, be the one to change and break that chain. And so don't wait for something to happen. You be the one to create that change, right? And that's where it starts. And so I love to speak to all different type of audiences. We speak at schools, local communities. I speak to women groups. I speak to big real estate groups. I travel around the world to speak. And it's really just to help uplift and inspire and empower other people. And I hope any part of my story that you can take a small sliver of that and incorporate it into your own life. Because, there's a saying, if we could truly look into each other's hearts and see the unique struggles that each of us have gone through or are currently going through, the world would be so much more gentle, kinder, more compassionate, and loving. If we can operate on that heart space and have more unity than division, less judgment, then that's the beauty of why I love to speak to so many different audiences and so many different backgrounds. Because if we just have hope and belief in ourselves and our creator, I think that's all we need. We can make anything happen. And I just hope and pray that, we can touch as many lives and create that ripple effect and all the different verticals and vehicles. And I just think if you have a platform, you have a story, share that. Be vulnerable enough to share, because I decided to only start sharing and speaking more because I just believe if we can help even one other person, and that one person can have an impact on themselves and their immediate family and then their communities, that is a ripple effect. And each individual be the one to create that ripple effect.
I love that.
Yeah.
Be the one. Be the one that breaks that chain of anything being passed down to your kids. Be that one that makes the difference in your community. Be the one who makes an impact in the lives of the children, etc. Be the one. And I know that you and Vanessa and Kira have talked about putting together a retreat, a goddess retreat,
Yeah.
for women down here. And so if the audience is interested in attending that and getting to know Dr. Hoa better together with Vanessa and Kira, then you can of course just go to the Liberating Humanity website and get some more information there. We'll make it super easy for you to just request more information on any of the retreats that are intriguing to you. So thank you for
Thank you
joining
so
me
much,
today.
Paul. Oh, really appreciate it.
Incredibly grateful. Grateful for you, for your family, for your huge hearts, for all of the people whose lives have been positively affected because of the choices that you made. So super
Thank you so
grateful for
much,
that.
Paul.
Thank you for joining us on the Liberating Humanity podcast. I'm Paul Hutchinson. This has been super exciting to spend this time with Dr. Hoa and going through her journey of personal transformation and growth so that she could be the one to implement change in her family, in her life, in her community. That's what I encourage you to do as well. Thank you.